all these communities,
Mhm.
and that together we need to be working in order
I'm gonna
to
bring
really
in
reform society. Sorry.
no worries. I'm gonna bring Elisa Grishman now, who's our lead analyst to join the conversation. Elisa, do you have
Hey,
questions for
Lisa.
Judy?
Hi, Judy. It's such an honor to have you on our program. So I'm kind of like, I'm in awe of you because I'm a proud adapter. Oh, I should first describe myself. I am a fabulously fat, tattooed white woman with dark brown hair. I'm wearing a blue t-shirt with the Superman symbol, except instead of the S in the middle, it's the wheelchair. So I call it my superpower shirt because I am awesome. Um, So, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was that I do a lot of work with student volunteer groups and things like that. And something that's so important to me is the idea of normalizing disability. And when I have these groups, I'll ask them, what is the most common disability accommodation in the country? And just watch their minds be blown when I point out that it's glasses. So, what to you, what does normalization mean to you? And how can we, improve that and keep this going, especially with young people?
I think normalization means that as disabled people, we don't have to hide our disability, that we can be proud of who we are and we can move about society with an expectation that the barriers that have prevented us from being able to live our lives equally will be resolved. And by that, I'm not just talking about physical barriers. I am obviously talking about physical barriers. I'm also talking about barriers in the area of technology, but I'm also talking about barriers in employment, and I'm talking about, and we can't make anyone change their mind, their attitudes. That's something that people have to be doing on their own. But I think it's really important that my vision for a future is when I open children's books, there are disabled people in those books. When I watch television and advertising and movies and documentaries, that they're not necessarily just on disability, that disabled people are, in the director's room, in the writer's room, in the production room. They're playing various characters that are not necessarily just disabled characters, but just, people. And that we stop seeing disabled individuals being played by non-disabled people. I mean, I think that's really something that we have to be looking at. And that newspapers, journalism, the general news is looking at issues around disability in a much deeper way. So we look at COVID right now as an example. We know that 50, 60,000 of the people who have died are people who've lived in nursing homes and other congregate living places. But we're not really talking about who those people are. And those people they all have disabilities. They have disabilities. They're in hospitals. They're dying. They're poor. And even if they're not poor, they're living in these segregated environments where um, the virus itself more rapidly goes through these facilities. Now, what do we need for change? We need legislation that enables people to stay in their homes, to be able to live in their homes in an accessible environment, and to able to get the personnel that they need, that they can play a role in hiring and training and directing, and that the people that are working with us are getting paid a good wage and can feel dignified about who they are and the work they're doing. That to me is very important. We need to stop looking at nursing homes as a place where people should be going, regardless of the severity of the person's disability. I think all of those things, we need to change the paradigm. We need to be asking, why are we not learning about people with hidden disabilities, with learning disabilities, depression, anxiety, diabetes, epilepsy, lupus, whatever the invisible disability may be. And we need to be asking questions about, where are people with visible disabilities? Why are they not in our workplaces, actively involved in other parts of our communities? We need to look at what role we individually are playing in not facilitating the advancement of the rights of all people, including disabled people.
Preach, preach.
Thank you.
I had one other thing I want to ask, and I am a proud member of ADAPT. I've been on, my own share of protests and getting the Disability Integration Act and whatnot. I know we have to move on in a second, but I just, kind of yes, no question. If tomorrow they created an office to enforce enforce the ADA and actually make enforcements happen, would you head it?
I mean, there are many offices. I think what we have to realize is the ADA is one piece of legislation. It doesn't deal with like home and community-based services. It can deal with when they're being provided, are they being provided in a non-discriminatory way? But we need to we need other legislation. We need money for the other legislation. We need to get rid of waiting lists, all these things that need to happen. And ADA can't do that. So strong enforcement of the ADA plus new laws with appropriate funding. And we have to really recognize that at the local level now, as budgets are being developed for the next year, we need to be a part of those discussions because COVID is costing a lot of money. And as such, there are going to be real battles with what's going to go on with the budget.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Judy. And we're going to hear from Judy a little bit more later on in the show. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Elena. Jennifer Keelan-Chaffins is the author of All the Way to the Top, How One Girl's Fight for Americans with Disabilities Changed Everything. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I feel that I need to make one correction. I am not the author of All the Way to the Top. The author of All the Way to the Top is actually Annette Bay Pimentel. I did write the foreword for this book, though.
Okay, thank you for the correction. That's important. Now, you were 8 years old when you famously got out of your wheelchair and climbed the Capitol steps in Washington, D.C. What do you feel now? I believe that footage is in Crip Camp. What do you feel now when you look back on that footage?
That's a trip down memory lane. And it makes me feel very proud to be part of that moment.
Now, the children's book, All the Way to the Top, which I mentioned before, it is your story of disability activism from a young age. What do you hope people learn and get out of this book?
This book is a teaching tool. It is a teaching tool to teach the next generation the importance of the ADA, the disability rights movement, and the Capitol Crawl. It is also a tool to teach young children the importance on how to recognize discrimination and the tools that they need in order to combat it.
Have you attended any readings with kids yet?
I have. When we first did the launch for this book, I actually did 4 presentations in elementary schools here in Colorado. We were supposed to do 6, but I did 4 with the author, Annette, and that was before our governor shut down the state.
So what's on your plate right now as far as activism? Like where do you want to see the movement go, especially in your corner of it?
What I really want to see right now is I want the movement to continue, and I want it to be able to be taught to the next generation. I think it's extremely important that we teach the importance of the disability rights movement as part of the civil rights movement, and it needs to be taught in our history and in our schools as curriculum.
Have you been to any marches or protests this spring with all the Black Lives Matter protests in America?
I have not attended any protests this spring. Once COVID hit, I am considered at risk, so I have been staying home. I have been doing Zoom presentations through Zoom and FaceTime and Skype. So I have been doing virtual demonstrations.
I understand that your mom was a big supporter of yours when you were a kid. Can you describe like what that relationship was like and how it evolved, and what people from the outside should know about the families of people with disabilities and how they can support them?
My family is absolutely awesome. They're a great support system. They always encouraged me to do anything and everything that I wanted to do. And so if I wanted to ride a tricycle or ride a horse, they would use adaptive equipment so that I could meet my goals. But they were always very supportive.
What was your favorite activity like that when you were a kid?
My favorite activity was riding horses. I loved horse therapy. As a matter of fact, my grandfather, he was a cowboy and he loved horses. And when I was little, um, as part of my physical therapy regime, he put me on the back of a horse. And that's actually how I learned to gain balance and open my hands. Because when I was little, I didn't have control of my hands very well. So I learned how to open and use my hands through horseback riding.
That's fascinating. Are you involved in horses currently?
I have been involved in hippotherapy as well as therapeutic riding and dressage. At one point, when I was in my teen years, I actually was evaluated to be part of the dressage Paralympic US team, but that was long ago, and I actually have not been on a horse in quite a few years.
Would you recommend that kids with disabilities have an animal in their lives? Is that something important, you think?
I think it is important. I know that for me, I've had animals all of my life. I have my service dog with me right now. And so animals for kids with disabilities is very important for physical, psychological, and emotional development. And so I think it's very important for kids to have animals.
Is there something about the lack of, I mean, the human gaze can be very judgmental. Is there something about sort of the healing power of creatures that love you for who you are?
Yes, animals don't judge. They
Animals,
love
yeah,
you
yeah.
regardless. And it's actually what makes it really comforting for children is the fact that they don't judge. And that helps them, relax and be comfortable. I've noticed that especially with kids that have, anxiety or autism. And so that's very important.
Mm-hmm. So you're famous for the Capitol Crawl, which is a very important demonstration in 1990 in the run-up to the American with Disabilities Act. What's another moment in the movement that you kind of prize as something you're proud of?
I'm actually very proud of my very first protest. I joined the disability rights movement when I was 6 years old, when ADAPT National came to Phoenix to protest the lack of wheelchair accessible buses. And my mom's cousin, Tom Olin, who's actually a very famous photographer, he does the photography for the disability rights movement, as well as Diane Coleman of Not Dead Yet, actually stayed at our house. And they were the ones that invited me to join ADAPT National when they were in Phoenix doing that protest. And this was actually the very first time that I had seen adults with disabilities just like myself fighting for their rights. And at the time, I was 6 years old, and I actually was experiencing, discrimination myself, because my neighborhood school, which I could see from my house, it was literally right across the street from my house, would not let me attend that school because I was in a wheelchair and because there were no curb cuts. And so by the time I attended my first protest, I saw all these adults fighting for their rights and using their voice. And I was like, you know what? I want to do that too. Because at that point I realized, hey, I don't have to go to the segregated school for kids with disabilities. I can go to my neighborhood school. I can fight for my rights and sign me up. I want to join. So needless to say, by the end of the weekend, I was leading a protest in downtown Phoenix.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to bring in Josie Badger now, who's one of our analysts too. Hi, Josie.
Hi, it's so great to have Jennifer and Judy on this call. We got the 3 J's going on here. So really glad you're here, Jennifer, and I get to chat with you. As I look at some of the pictures that Tom Olin took, and I look at the photo of you crawling up the steps, I see a life that a lot of individuals with disabilities don't have, of growing up in a disability aware family. How do you think that, like, having family, friends, and relatives that were active in the disability community kind of changed you and maybe your childhood?
I think that for me, growing up in the disability rights movement, you know, as a child, I took my involvement really seriously because of the fact that I was so young. And I wanted to make sure that not only my voice was heard, but my generation of kids with disabilities would be heard as well as future generations. And so I think that growing up with that awareness actually encouraged my involvement and my passion for fighting for disability rights.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing I didn't mention was that I right now I'm wearing a green shirt and I am pretty pale. Need to be working on my suntan a little bit. And I have some dark brown hair, at least in this lighting. But Jennifer, I think that you have so many interesting stories and perspectives, because you and myself and Elisa are all right around the same age. And I can tell you that at the time that the ADA was passed, I would not have been crawling up the steps of the Capitol. And so kudos. But that was a huge moment, both nationally and for people with disabilities. And I assume for you as well. How do you look back and think about that moment? Was it a pivotal moment in your life?
It was a pivotal moment in my life, and the Capitol crawl was a pivotal moment because we were doing it to show Congress why it was important to pass the ADA, because Congress was stalling the passage. And so we wanted to show Congress why it was important to pass the ADA. So the Capitol Crawl was a visual demonstration of the barriers that people with disabilities face every day.
When you were crawling up those steps, and when you were at that event, did you realize at that time the impact that that would have on the rest of the country?
I did. Even at a young age, I did realize that I had a responsibility, and so one of the reasons why I took it so seriously was because I knew that that was an important part of our history, and I knew the important part that that would play, even at such a young age. And so I realized that, you know, that this was important and that I had an important role to play.
Thanks, Josie. Jennifer, I'm going to turn it back to Elena and Dara now.
Thank you for speaking with us, Jennifer. Now we have a couple more guests to add to our party. Our podcast executive producer, Jennifer Savett Jordan. She'll introduce Miss Erin Gannon. Hey, Jennifer.
Hello.
Okay, hi. All right. I am taking a minute to get the text straightened out. Would you want to ask Jennifer one more question? Jennifer, did you describe yourself, by the way?
I have not. I am actually sitting in my wheelchair. I am a blonde young woman wearing blue jeans and a maroon shirt.
I didn't describe myself either. I'm using a motorized wheelchair. I have on a print floral accordion pleated blouse. I'm wearing glasses and what color are they? Purple and teal. And I have brown hair, and I'm sitting in the foyer of our apartment so you can see plants and windows and pictures and different symbolic things in our house.
I have a question for both Judy and Jennifer. How significant a figure is Tammy Duckworth for the movement, who's the senator from Illinois, who's under consideration as a possible vice presidential pick and who lost her legs, I believe, during the Iraq War?
You want to go first, Jennifer?
I'll let you go first.
Okay.
Hi.
Well,
So rebringing everybody back, we have Erin Gannon here. I wanted to introduce you to Erin. Can you hear me?
I just asked Jennifer,
Okay.
I just asked a question about Tammy Duckworth. Do you mind if Judy gives it a shot?
Oh, sorry.
Real quick.
Okay.
I mean, very briefly, if the senator gets picked, it would be great. Whoever Biden picks, I'll support. But obviously, if Senator Duckworth were to be picked, it would be wonderful for a lot of reasons. One is she's a woman, she's a minority woman, she's a disabled woman, she owns her disability. It's a very integral part of her life and her work. But I think what's important running for vice president is that she'd be a person who could represent the entire country, and if need be, would be a great president.
Right, thank you.
Hi. So I'm Jennifer, and I have Erin Gannon has joined us, and Erin, I always say, is the reason that we're here. Besides my career in journalism, I work as a direct support provider in Erin's group home. And at one point, she told me she heard I was on the radio and she wanted to be on the radio. So in the couple years after that, Erin won 2 journalism awards, and she just looked at your videos. Erin, could you move your camera a little so we could see your face a little better? Better. Good. Great. And she just watched the videos of you, Jennifer and Judy. And what I like to say about Erin too is she and I are about the same age. Little younger than 50, and Erin was one of the first people, to benefit from really the education changes that you push forward.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Hi, Erin.
And that's Jennifer, the one.
Hi, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Hello.
So everybody can come back now, and we're
And
going
I'm
to.
Judy. Nice to meet you, Erin.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh. And I think we're gonna do a toast. Does everybody like have something to drink or something fun? or very good at pretending? Okay.
So we'd like to invite all of our
Dara,
guests.
do you want to lead us, Dara?
Yeah. Before we go, we'd like to invite all of our guests, our listeners, in honor of the ADA. We would like to toast. We'd like to toast our champions here also. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Jen. Without you guys, none of this would have gotten past. And we appreciate the fight that you have fought and the fight that you continue to fight.
Same to you.
Cheers.
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 Elisa, top marks for the glass. Very Belgian.
But this is a Pittsburgh thing. I've got the Pittsburgh glass.
Nat.
Great. Well, Dara, Elena, would you mind closing us out and letting us know who we are?
Yeah, absolutely. Go.
We'd like to say again, thank you for Jennifer Keelan-Chaffins. To order a copy of her book or to learn more about her works, you can visit jklegacy.com. And thank you again, Judy Heumann. You can also check out her book, Being Human. And if you haven't already watched the amazing documentary Crip Camp on Netflix, we really encourage you to do that. I'm Dara Thompson with my sister Elena Gibbs, and this is a Valid Podcast. Please be gentle to yourself and be kind to others.
A Valid
Thank you.
Podcast. A Valid Podcast is produced by Unabridged Press. It is co-produced by the Center for Media Innovations at Point Park University. A Valid Podcast drops Friday mornings on Apple Podcasts, Google, and Spotify. We hope you'll listen and leave your feedback and a rating. 5 stars actually is what we want. 5.
That's how people find us.
Right. It helps our show and voices be heard, which we want everybody to hear about this amazingness. For more info, go to avalidpodcast.com. So everybody give a shout out, go around your little bubble, and tell the world who you are.
Francesca?
Hi, everyone. I'm Francesca DeBecco. I'm a freelance reporter and associate producer for A Valid Podcast. I'm joining new this season, so it's really exciting to kick off not only celebrating the 30 years of the ADA, but having you two wonderful guests with us. So we hope to continue and continue telling great stories surrounding the disability community. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yay.
Nick?
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Tomarello. I'm a rising senior broadcast reporting major at Point Park University in Pittsburgh, and I'm an associate producer of A Valid Podcast. And I just want to say thank you to our entire team for everything that we have done and for all the great work that we will do in the future. And, you know, as someone who doesn't identify as with a disability, I really appreciate everyone who has opened my eyes to this wonderful new community. And we've done a lot so far, and there's a lot more that we can do. So thank you to everyone, and thank you, Judy and Jennifer, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.